Welcome to this rapid revision exam skills session looking at the Edexcel Paper 3, Question 2. Explain, a 12-mark question. This will be focused on the modern depth study Weimar and Nazi Germany 1918 to 1939. If you're one of my actual students, you can ignore this video, we don't do this topic. Here's a reminder about what the Pearson Edexcel Paper 3 is all about. This paper generally covers a modern depth study. An example of such a study is Weimar and Nazi Germany 1918 to 1939. This particular topic comprises Weimar Germany 1918 to 1933 and Nazi Germany 1933 to 1939. Other topics are similarly organised, e.g. the USA Civil Rights and Vietnam topic, which is referred to as Conflict at Home and Abroad 1954 to 1975. That's the topic that I do with my students. You'll answer questions on sources, your knowledge and interpretations within this paper. Therefore, there is a separate sources and interpretations sheet and booklet that you'll need to have for this paper. Make sure that you've got that at the start of the exam. The total time allowed for this exam is 1 hour and 20 minutes. Okay, so let's get into the question. This sort of question is quite similar to the 12-mark questions that you find in paper 2. You have to explain. So let's have a look at what it actually says. Explain why there was opposition in Germany to the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. Personally, I think this is an absolute gift of a question, but let's have a look at why. As part of these questions, you're given 2 stimulus points. You may use the following in your answer, but bear in mind that you don't have to. However, knowing that these 2 terms are actually relevant to the question means it's usually pretty helpful to use them. However, you must also use information of your own. You are limited to a maximum of 8 marks if you don't also use information that comes from your own knowledge. With this particular question, I'm reminded very much about LAM. That's Land, Army, Money and Blame. A way of remembering what the terms of the Treaty of Versailles were. There were terms related to land or territorial terms. There were terms related to the army or military terms. But also remember the money or financial terms and the fact that Germany had to accept blame for the war. And if we take all of that into account, we should be able to explain why there was opposition in Germany to the Treaty of Versailles. So you're not looking at why the treaty was necessarily unfair, you're looking at why the unfairness was unpopular enough in Germany to cause opposition. So here's what the question is actually demanding of you. For this question, you'll need to explain how examples you know led to opposition to the Treaty of Versailles. Within this, it is implicit that you should know what the different terms were as well. As a target, this is what it says in the exam board's mark scheme. Analysis of second order concepts, in this case causation, why there was opposition. And also knowledge and understanding of features and characteristics. Those are known as AO1 and AO2. AO1 is knowledge, AO2 is analysis. That's assessment objective in plain English. There's an equal balance between the 2 assessment objectives here, with 6 marks for your knowledge and 6 marks for your analysis. You should include enough examples, 3 is probably sufficient, and include a brief conclusion explaining the most important reason or the overall theme as to why there was opposition in Germany to the Treaty of Versailles. You should aim to spend about 18 minutes on this question. Let's have a look at the mark scheme then. I've cut out level 1 because really we should be aiming higher than that, and the same with level 2. We're going to look now at some of the jargon that's used in the mark scheme. I don't expect you to understand every word, but we're going to look for some key details and differences between level 3 and level 4. In other words, the difference between a good answer and a really good answer. For level 3, an explanation is given showing some analysis, which is mainly directed at the conceptual focus of the question, which here is why there was opposition to Germany, to the Treaty of Versailles. Compare that to band 4, which says an analytical explanation is given, which is directed consistently at the conceptual focus of the question. So you don't wander around and go off topic and look at things that aren't relevant to why there was opposition in Germany to the Treaty of Versailles. Next, it shows a line of reasoning that is generally sustained, although some passages may lack coherence and organisation. Again, that might mean that there may be things which seem a little bit out of order or are wandering from the point for level 3. But with level 4, you're laser focused on it, showing a line of reasoning that is coherent, sustained and logically structured. Then when it comes to knowledge, both of them say that accurate and relevant information is selected, but here in level 3 it says that you're showing good knowledge, The difference being that in level 4 you are precisely selecting knowledge to address the question, showing a wide-ranging knowledge and understanding of the required features or characteristics of the period studied. So your knowledge will be not only really well focused on the question, but it'll be wide-ranging too. A final warning, and I've mentioned this before, you can only get a maximum of 8 marks and you cannot access level 4, no matter how good your answer is, if all you are looking at is the military terms and territorial terms of the Treaty of Versailles in your answer. So make sure that you include some information of your own. When you come to write your answer, it'll look a little something like this. I often encourage my students to write point, example, explain and link paragraphs. This isn't essential by any means. However, it's a good way of remembering to include good amounts of knowledge and also balancing that with enough explanation and analysis. Remember, you are getting 6 marks for your knowledge and 6 marks for your analysis with this style of question. So let's have a look at an example and see how well I did. Remember that I do not actually teach this course, so I'm not so familiar with the specification as your own teacher might be. However, I've taught the old specification on a very similar topic, so my knowledge is pretty good. One reason there was opposition in Germany to the Treaty of Versailles is that it weakened Germany's military. The Allies feared future attacks by Germany, so its army was limited to 100,000 men with no tanks. Germany was forbidden from having an air force, and the navy was limited to 6 battleships, 6 cruisers and no submarines. This meant Germany was now vulnerable to attack by the Allies and could not effectively defend itself with such a small force. This caused opposition because the people of Germany felt humiliated and weakened despite having had a strong army before and during World War I. Let's consider where I'm picking up the marks here. So the point here is focused at the question. One reason there was opposition in Germany to the Treaty of Versailles was that it weakened the Germans' military. Alright, I've made a point here using one of the stimulus points too, the military terms. Let's see how I've backed that up with accurate knowledge then. Yes, I've got lots of examples of the military terms of the Treaty of Versailles in there, showing that I've got a wide-ranging knowledge of it. And then I've added in an extra bit of AO1 and AO2 here, showing why the effect that this had on Germany and why it might make it unpopular. And then I've really focused it and linked it back to the question in a logical and structured way at the end. This caused opposition because. If you haven't included some sort of phrase like that within your answer, the chances are the examiner is not going to be thinking that you're particularly focused on the question here, the focus on why there was opposition. So it's a good strong start, but it's not a full answer. Let's see what I would write next. Remember, point, example, explain and link again. This time I'm going to use the next of the stimulus points, territorial terms. Another reason for opposition to the Treaty of Versailles was the effect of the treaty's territorial terms. The treaty confiscated Germany's overseas empire and gave 13% of Germany to other countries. For example, the region of Alsace-Lorraine, which had been won by Germany in the Franco-Prussian War, was ceded back to France, and the Saar coalfields also came under Allied control. This had a huge impact on Germany's wealth and power, as Germany lost industrial regions and the trade and wealth that this brought. This caused opposition because it weakened Germany's ability to pay for the war, including the reparations, and made Germany smaller, which many German people found humiliating. Okay, so my first point here is linked again to not only one of the stimulus points, but a reason for opposition. I've made that explicit. I've then again given detailed knowledge about some of the territorial terms of the treaty. There are others that you could go for. And I've explained the effect that this had on Germany before finally linking that effect back towards why there was opposition in Germany to the Treaty of Versailles, including the effect it had on Germany's wealth and the fact that it was seen as humiliating. Now let's have a look at another example. So far I've used just the military terms and the territorial terms. Let's see how I get on with this paragraph. Germany was forced to take blame for the war. Article 231 of the treaty was known as the War Guilt Clause, and by signing it, Germany was admitting blame for World War I. This was very unpopular with the German people. This meant Germany had to pay the reparations to the Allies to repair the damage caused in World War I. Okay, what do you notice first of all about this paragraph? It's not quite as detailed, is it? So am I showing wide-ranging knowledge? Probably not. However, the knowledge is all accurate, and I would get some AO1 marks for the accuracy of my knowledge here, especially this bit which says that this was unpopular with the German people. That's more focused on the question, but not really explicitly. It's, again, not showing that I'm completely focused at the question. I'm just mainly directed at the question. But here's where it falls down a bit. Sure, that point is true, but is it linked to why there was opposition in Germany to the Treaty of Versailles? No, it isn't, not directly. And the same can be said for my so-called link sentence here. In fact, it's not linked to the question at all. It just gives another link to a piece of knowledge. So this is an example of how you can actually wander away from the focus of the question, but I've also included it as a bit of a reminder of a bit of own knowledge that you could include. The fact about the Article 231 war guilt clause would absolutely be relevant to this topic, but I've not used it terribly well here. Let's see if I can put that right in the conclusion. Overall, the most important reason there was opposition to the Treaty of Versailles was the war guilt clause, Article 231. This term of the treaty involved Germany accepting sole responsibility for starting the First World War. This meant that the Allies were then able to force Germany to accept the military, territorial and financial terms of the treaty, as Germany had accepted blame for the war and all the suffering it had brought. This was widely seen as unfair. This caused opposition to the treaty in Germany, as most German people strongly disagreed that Germany was solely responsible for the war. Moreover, they saw the decision to accept blame as a betrayal by the new government of Germany, feeding into the stab in the back theory. Again, wide-ranging knowledge here, focused on the question. So I have analysed a little bit deeper by considering the most important reason there was opposition. I'm giving supporting AO1 knowledge, and even more there, whilst also linking it back to the question by referring to it as unfair, or rather seen as very unfair by Germans. And finally, in AO2, really relating it back to why German people opposed it. The unfairness, the fact that Germany was so weakened by it, and even mentioning the stab in the back theory, or Dolchschloss theory as it was known. And so that ties my answer together. I will have mentioned the military, territorial and financial terms within my answer, and then here I'm justifying that Article 231 effectively caused those other bad effects. If you're doing some other topics, you could always try some of these. China. This is something I definitely don't teach, but maybe you can answer it. Remember that the mark schemes I've been through and the techniques I've been through will be helpful for this style of question too. Explain why the Great Leap Forward failed to achieve its aims. You may use the following in your answer: backyard furnaces and Mao's leadership. You must also use information of your own. And Russia. Explain why the Bolsheviks were able to seize power in Russia in October 1917. You may use the following in your answer: food shortages and the leadership of Trotsky. You must also use information of your own. Or maybe, like my students, you're doing civil rights. Explain why the Montgomery bus boycott succeeded in achieving its aims. You may use the following in your answer: the Montgomery Improvement Association and the Supreme Court. You must use information of your own. Some final points then. 12-mark explain questions require detailed knowledge and precise explanation. You'll be provided with 2 stimulus points, which you may use, but you will need to include examples from your own knowledge too. You'll need to explain your answer in relation to the issue raised by the question. Keep this in mind. Point, example, explain and link can help you structure it. That's the end of this rapid revision video. I hope it's been useful to you, and if it has, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I won't be able to do so many videos on topics that I don't teach myself, as after all, this is just something that I do with any little bits of spare time that I get. However, if you're desperate for me to do a rapid revision video on something, pop it in the comments below, and if I know something about it and I've got the time, I'll definitely try and help out. If you're revising for an exam that's coming up, the very best of luck. Goodbye.